The sun had barely risen over the quiet hills of Morogoro when the first shovel struck the earth. The cemetery, wrapped in early morning mist, was so silent that every clang of metal echoed like thunder. Two local gravediggers, Musa and Jabari, worked slowly, their hands covered in red dust, sweat trickling down their faces. It was supposed to be a routine exhumation. The village elders had ordered a reburial due to a mistaken grave marker. But as the two men dug deeper, something strange began to stir beneath the soil. At first, Musa thought he imagined it, a faint sound, soft and trembling, almost like the wind whimpering through the grass. But then Jabari froze mid-swing, his eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his voice shaking. Musa leaned closer to the pit. The sound came again, faint but unmistakable. It was the cry of a baby. For a moment, both men stood paralyzed. Fear wrapped around them like cold air. The grave they were standing over had been filled just yesterday. Everyone had attended the funeral. A young woman named Amahal Dlamini, who had died during childbirth. The village mourned her loss deeply, believing both she and her newborn were gone. And yet, here they were, standing above her grave, listening to a baby's cry echo from beneath the earth. "It can't be," Jabari muttered, trembling. "That's impossible." But the sound grew louder, more desperate, more real. Their hands shook as they dropped to their knees and began digging faster, ignoring the dust that filled their lungs. The soil loosened, the sound became clearer. And when the tip of their shovel struck wood, the crying stopped, replaced by a faint rustle inside the coffin. They looked at each other, hearts racing. Musa grabbed the lid and lifted it open with trembling hands. What they saw inside changed their lives forever. Lying in the coffin was Amahal, her face peaceful, her skin pale and still, her hands folded over her chest. But beside her, wrapped in part of her burial cloth, was a tiny newborn, eyes shut, chest rising and falling, alive and crying softly. For a moment, neither man spoke. Tears rolled down Musa's dust-covered face as he whispered. She must have shielded him. Even as she died, the air grew heavy with emotion. It was as if Amal's final breath had been spent protecting the child who now wept beside her still body. Musa gently lifted the baby, his hands trembling, his eyes glistening in disbelief. The child's skin was warm, his tiny fingers curling around Musa's thumb. "He's breathing," Musa gasped, voice cracking. Jabari crossed himself and muttered a prayer, stepping back as if afraid of what they had uncovered. The world seemed to stop for that brief moment. No birds, no wind, no movement, just the cry of life from beneath the ground. Then suddenly, both men began running toward the village, shouting at the top of their lungs. "The baby is alive! Amal's baby is alive!" Dust rose behind them as they sprinted through the narrow paths, carrying the child in their arms, while villagers emerged from their homes, confusion spreading like wildfire. By the time they reached the village square, a crowd had gathered, men, women, and children staring in disbelief as Musa held up the crying baby. Elder Kabwe, a tall, dignified man with a silver beard, pushed through the crowd, his eyes narrowing. "What madness is this?" he demanded. Musa fell to his knees, breathless. "Elder Kabwe, we dug her grave and found this baby alive beside her." The elder's face hardened. "Do you mock the dead?" He snapped. "You expect us to believe such a tale?" The murmurs grew louder until the baby cried again, a loud, piercing wail that silenced everyone. The elder's expression shifted. He stepped closer, looked into the child's eyes, and said quietly, "By the ancestors, he lives." The villagers whispered among themselves. Some bowed their heads, muttering prayers. Others backed away in fear. "It's a curse," one old woman hissed. "The dead should not breathe." But then Father Zuberi, the village priest, stepped forward, his robe swaying in the wind. He took the baby gently from Musa's arms and placed a trembling hand on the child's forehead. His voice softened. "No," he said, tears filling his eyes. "This child carries no curse. He carries his mother's spirit." The words hung heavy in the air. Some villagers wept. Others dropped to their knees. For the first time, hope and fear blended together like fire and smoke. As they took the child to the community hall, young women rushed to bring warm water and soft cloth. The baby's cries softened as they washed him, his tiny chest rising steadily. But when they cleaned his wrist, something caught everyone's attention. a delicate bracelet woven from dry grass and red beads. No one recognized it, yet every person in the room felt its weight. Father Zuberi stared at it for a long moment before whispering, "Amahal must have tied it herself. Even in death, she marked him with her love." The villagers fell silent. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, even though the sky was clear. Night soon descended over Morogoro. The baby slept quietly in a woven basket near the fire, while the villagers argued outside. Some claimed it was a miracle, a sign that the ancestors had spared the child. Others whispered that something unnatural had happened. "If she was dead, how could he live?" a man said nervously. "Maybe someone hid him in the grave." The crowd grew restless, suspicion mixing with fear. But while they argued, far beyond the village, at the edge of the forest, a shadow watched silently. A tall man stood half-hidden among the trees, holding a faded photograph of Amahal in his hand. His face was hardened by time, his voice a whisper in the dark. "So, she kept my child after all." The man's eyes glimmered under the moonlight, as he looked toward the village lights flickering in the distance. The night wind carried his words like a secret. "If he's truly alive," he murmured, "then they'll all know what she hid from me." He turned, vanishing back into the forest, leaving behind only the faint rustle of leaves. Back in the village, the baby stirred in his sleep, his small hand clutching the grass bracelet tighter, as if sensing that somewhere beyond the shadows, his past was already walking toward him. The morning after the discovery, the village of Morogoro buzzed with unease. Smoke from morning fires drifted through the air as whispers spread faster than the wind. Some called the child the chosen one, others refused to go near him. But Father Zuberi refused to let fear decide the boy's fate. He named the child Luyanda, meaning the one who brings love. "If this baby lived through death," he said softly, "then he is meant for something greater." Yet deep in the forest, another man walked with darker intentions. The stranger who had watched from the shadows, Cato, now approached the village gates, a bag slung across his shoulder and rage hidden behind his calm eyes. Musa was the first to see him. "Who are you?" he called, stepping forward, his voice guarded. Cato lifted his head slowly, dust clinging to his jacket. "I'm here for what's mine," he said. The tone was low, confident, but behind it lay something broken. He revealed an old photograph, Amahal, smiling, pregnant, standing beside him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "You're the father?" Musa whispered. Cato nodded. "She died without telling me. I came too late." The words carried pain, but something in his eyes made Father Zuberi uneasy, as if grief was not the only thing that brought him here. That night, Cato sat by the fire, staring at the sleeping child. His hands trembled as he touched the grass bracelet around Luyanda's wrist. "She used to make these," he murmured. "Said they protected the soul." Musa watched from afar. He wanted to believe the man's story, but something didn't feel right. When he asked where Cato had been all this time, the man looked away. "Working in the city?" he replied too quickly. "She told me not to come back." Zuberi frowned. "Amahal would never say that," he said quietly. "She loved you." Cato said nothing. Only the crackling fire answered. As midnight approached, thunder rumbled in the sky. The baby stirred, crying softly. Suddenly, lightning flashed, and with it, a strange noise echoed from the direction of the graveyard. The villagers froze. Musa and Jabari grabbed their torches and ran toward the sound. The earth at Amal's grave had shifted again. The soil looked freshly disturbed, though no one had been near it. "This can't be real," Jabari whispered, his torch flickering. "Why does the ground move?" Musa knelt, his voice trembling. "Maybe she's trying to tell us something." In the distance, Cato watched them, his expression unreadable. By dawn, fear had returned to the village. Women refused to go near the graveyard. Children whispered that Amal's spirit walked at night. But Father Zuberi refused to let superstition take over. He gathered everyone in the old meeting hall. "Fear feeds darkness," he said firmly. "Amal's love saved this child. That's no curse. That's a miracle." Yet, as he spoke, Cato's face darkened. He stood slowly. "A miracle?" he said bitterly. "She died because of me." The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to him. Cato's voice cracked as he continued. "I left for work, promised her a better life, but I lost everything. When I came back, she was gone." He looked toward the basket where Luyanda slept. If that baby lived, then it means she didn't want to let me go, not even in death. His words sent chills through the room. Zuberi approached gently. Sometimes the ancestors choose pain to teach us truth, he said softly, but Kato shook his head. No, this wasn't fate. Someone buried her alive. The hall erupted in shock. Musa stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. You lie, he shouted, but Kato's gaze was sharp. Her body was warm when I found her grave, he hissed. She had scratches on her arms. She tried to get out. Gasps filled the air. The priest's face went pale. Musa stumbled back, his heart pounding. No, that can't be true. But Kato stepped forward. You buried her, he said coldly. You, the men who claim to honor her. Silence blanketed the room. Musa's hands shook. We followed orders from the elders, he stammered. The midwife said she was gone. Kato's voice broke. You buried her while she still breathed. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Father Zuberi raised his hands. Enough, he commanded. This truth will destroy us if we let anger guide it. Let the ancestors speak. But Kato's pain had turned to fury. The ancestors didn't bury her, he said through tears. You did, he stormed out, leaving the hall in stunned silence. That night, rain fell hard over Morogoro. The storm howled as if the heavens wept for Emma Hall. Musa couldn't sleep. The sound of thunder echoed like her heartbeat in his mind. He rose, grabbed a torch, and walked to the graveyard alone. As he stood before Amal's grave, the wind whispered through the trees. I'm sorry, he murmured. I didn't know. Suddenly, lightning struck nearby, and for a brief moment, he saw Amal's silhouette in the mist, standing over the grave, smiling faintly. His torch fell from his hand. When he blinked, she was gone. The next morning, the villagers woke to the sound of bells. Kato was gone, vanished without a trace. Only a letter remained on the altar beside the sleeping baby. Father Zuberi opened it with trembling hands. The words were simple, written in Amal's handwriting. Do not let anger raise our son. Let love raise him. The ink was faded, but the message was clear. Zuberi looked toward the forest, whispering, She still speaks. Years passed. Leanda grew under Zuberi's care, strong, wise, and kind. The villagers who once feared him now sought his blessing. He carried his mother's bracelet always, never removing it. And though he never met his father again, some said they still saw a man wandering the forest trails at sunset, watching from afar, guarding from the shadows. One evening, as Leanda stood before his mother's grave, he placed a fresh white flower upon it and whispered softly, I was born in death, but you gave me life. The wind stirred gently, wrapping around him like an embrace. He smiled. Thank you, Mama. Your love never died. The camera slowly zooms out, the graveyard bathed in golden evening light, the village peaceful once more. The narrator's voice fades in softly. Some say miracles are born from faith. But in Morogoro, they learned that sometimes love itself can breathe beyond the grave.